Every long race begins long before the starting line, weeks before, months before, in quiet mornings when the alarm goes off and the rest of the world is still asleep. This is the work. Each week I document the training behind the next race on the calendar, the miles, the terrain, the mistakes, the small discoveries that happen out on the trail. Right now, all of this is building toward the Cocodona 250, a 250-mile trail race that runs across Arizona from the desert outside Black Canyon City to the mountains above Flagstaff. It's a race that takes runners through red rock canyons, high desert plateaus, and long stretches of wilderness where the only real job is to keep moving forward. But none of that happens without weeks like this one, week 8. A week that on the surface looks like a collection of numbers. But underneath those numbers is the real thing, the work. Every week of training eventually collapses into a handful of numbers: distance, elevation, time on the trail. But those numbers don't arrive all at once. They build slowly, run by run, until one day you open the training log and realize the week has quietly grown into something substantial. Week 8 was one of those weeks. By the time the final run was recorded, the tally looked like this: 133.5 kilometers of running, 2,311 meters of climbing. Now, on paper, those numbers look tidy, precise, the kind of figures that fit nicely inside a spreadsheet. But in real life, they represent something else entirely. They represent hours spent moving through the desert, over rocky trails, along dusty paths, up hills that seem entirely unnecessary when you first see them. They represent mornings when the body feels surprisingly cooperative, and afternoons when it does not. They represent the quiet arithmetic of endurance training, one run stacked on top of another until the week starts to resemble a small expedition. The distance alone, 133 kilometers, works out to roughly 83 miles. Which, depending on your perspective, is either a perfectly reasonable week of ultramarathon training or a deeply questionable life decision. The climbing 2,311 meters is about 7,600 feet of vertical gain. That's the equivalent of running from sea level up to the top of a respectable mountain and doing it entirely under your own power. No gondola, no chairlift, just legs and stubbornness. And that's the interesting thing about weeks like this. They don't feel epic while they're happening. Most of the time they feel routine. You lace the shoes, you start the watch, you head out the door. The miles accumulate quietly, almost anonymously, until suddenly the week ends and the numbers tell you something the runs themselves didn't, that the body is carrying a little more endurance than it did 7 days ago. Week 8 doesn't look dramatic. No single run leaps off the page as heroic. But taken together, the miles and the climbing form the kind of steady, unremarkable work that ultramarathons are built on. Because races like the Cocodona 250 are not won or even survived by the spectacular day. They're built from weeks like this, weeks where the training log quietly fills up with kilometers, and the legs, almost without noticing, become a little more prepared for what's coming next. So let me walk you through week 8, because every training week has its own personality. Some weeks are smooth, some are ragged. Some feel like they were stitched together out of heat, rocks, timing problems, and whatever food happened to be in a Ziploc bag. This was one of those weeks. By the end of it, the numbers were pretty clear. The work was real. The week had weight to it. But the week did not begin with drama. It began with Monday. Monday started early, out at the Maricopa trailhead near Sun Valley Parkway. The plan was simple, an out-and-back run before pickleball later that day. 19 kilometers total. And that is what it became, 19.3 kilometers in 2 hours and 17 minutes, with just 67 meters of elevation gain. So this was not a climbing day. This was a steady day, a rhythm day. The desert was quiet, cool, manageable. There was a camper van in the lot when I got there, one of those details that sticks with you for no real reason except that it means somebody else got there before you, or maybe slept there all night. And either way, the day had already started for somebody. I ran out past the white tank entrance through the campground area and turned around right where the math worked, 9.5 kilometers or so out, then back home the same way. Nothing dramatic happened, no wrong turns, no wildlife confrontation, no great revelation. And honestly, that mattered, because I was paying attention to the lateral side of my right foot, the area that had been a little tender the week before, and it held up just fine. So Monday was not flashy. It was better than flashy. It was solid. Tuesday looked a lot like Monday on paper. Another early start, another run before pickleball, another out and back on the Maricopa Trail. This time, the final tally was 19.07 kilometers in 2 hours and 16 minutes with only 26 meters of elevation gain. So again, not much climbing. This was flat running, controlled running, the kind of running where the numbers can lull you into thinking nothing much happened. But something did happen. About 8 kilometers in, I ran into the same large white shepherd dog I had seen the week before. Same dog, same general problem, loose again, barking again. The owner was in his SUV, and the dog came toward me, not quite as aggressively as before, but close enough that it got my attention and reminded me I did not have my pepper spray. That was encounter number 1. Then, maybe half a kilometer later, came encounter number 2, a Chihuahua, small dog, big opinion. The owner was yelling from a pickup truck for it to come back, and the dog was ignoring all of that because it had a different agenda, me. So I pulled out my camera extension pole, held it out in front of me, and that was enough. The Chihuahua decided this situation had changed, and it backed off, which is maybe not the most elegant moment of the week. But it was effective. Then I hit the turnaround near Grand Avenue and headed back, 19.07 kilometers total. On paper, Tuesday looks almost identical to Monday. In practice, it was the dog day. And then Wednesday arrived and changed the whole scale of the week. Wednesday was White Tank Mountain Regional Park. Wednesday was the climbing day. Wednesday was 37.47 kilometers, 1,412 meters of vertical gain, and 9 hours and 5 minutes on the move. That is not just a run, that is an expedition. I started from the library around 6:45 in the morning and almost immediately changed the plan. Normally I go one way, Bajada Trail to Goat Camp Trail, then up toward Goldwater Peak or Twin Peaks. But this time I turned onto Ford Canyon Trail instead. And almost right away, I had dogs again. A black dog and a blonde dog came at me barking. The black one got within inches. I thought about the pepper spray, decided not to use it. The owner called them back, got them leashed, and we all moved on. So that was the first interruption. The second came when I reached for my iPhone and it was gone, or so I thought. That sinking feeling is immediate. It does not build slowly. 1 second you are on a mountain trail, the next second you are living in a world where your phone is missing and the entire day now belongs to that problem. So I turned around and started backtracking. Then I turned on my Shocks headphones and heard the word connected. Connected to what? There is only one thing out there that those headphones ought to be connected to. I checked the front pocket of my vest. There it was, which was a very good moment. Not a heroic moment, just a very good moment. From there, the day opened up into what the Strava file confirms it was: a huge mountain effort, Goldwater Peak, Twin Peaks, long sections of climbing, long descents, technical terrain, hours out there. I saw my first snake of the season. I ate white rice from a Ziploc bag, a walking tamale, applesauce, peanut butter, used a cooling buff once the day heated up. And by the time it was over, the numbers told the story plainly. 37.47 kilometers and 1,412 meters of gain. That was the anchor day of the week. Everything else in week 8 turned around that effort. Thursday could have felt small after Wednesday, but it didn't, because Thursday had heat. The Strava file calls it 12.31 kilometers in 1 hour and 59 minutes with 233 meters of elevation gain. And those numbers tell you this was not a lazy recovery jog. This was a shorter run, yes, but not an easy environment. I started around 2:30 in the afternoon at Paloma Community Park, and the temperature was about 90 degrees. No clouds, hard sun, wind out of the west. The route climbs and descends through the hills early, then flattens out, then goes toward the dam. I ran through the tunnel at the dam, one of those small landmarks that always feels more interesting than it probably is, then added distance by running out toward a barrier gate so I could get the mileage up closer to the day's goal. This was one of those runs I did not especially want to do. I'd spent the morning on a Zoom call. The heat was high. The timing was bad. The whole thing had the feel of a run you can argue yourself out of. But once I got moving, it felt right. That happens a lot in training. The run you resist for 2 hours is often the run you are glad you did 10 minutes after it starts. And again, the right foot behaved. That mattered too. Friday was Black Canyon Trail, and the Strava file gives it the proper scale. 24.14 kilometers in 4 hours and 13 minutes with 485 meters of gain. So not as big as Wednesday, but still substantial. Still a real trail day. I started a little after 7 in the morning, temperature around 60 degrees, beautiful sky, wind in my face coming out of the north. This was my first Black Canyon run of 2026. And even when you know that trail, the trail does not exactly hand itself over to you. Roads cross roads, jeep tracks intersect single track. Sometimes the official trail is obvious and sometimes it is not. I was wearing the Norda 001s, which are great shoes, but without gaiters they let in dust and a little bit of trail debris. So there was that. And then there was the navigation question. Several times I pulled out the phone and checked the GPX on CalTopo. Once I drifted off route slightly, less than a quarter kilometer, and corrected it quickly. Which got me thinking, out there on the return, about how useful it would be if the Coros watch gave a better off-course alert, a buzz, a beep, some kind of little nudge that says, no, not this way, the other way. And maybe another nudge every kilometer, too. A quiet reminder that progress is happening, even when the terrain is rocky and slow. I turned around a little early for the full planned 26 because of timing and the need to get back, but given the terrain and the elevation, it was still a proper effort. I also had a walking tamale on the way back, which continues to perform at a very high level in these long-run conditions. So Friday was another meaningful day, not just distance, not just time, technical trail, navigation, elevation, focus. And then came Saturday, which Strava records as 2 separate trail runs. One was 10.26 kilometers with 40 meters of gain. The other was 10.95 kilometers with 48 meters of gain. So together, that is a little over 21 kilometers on the day. 2 runs, 2 entries, both short compared to the middle of the week, but together they matter because they show what this week really was. Not a week with one heroic day and a bunch of filler around it. A full week, a layered week, a week where the training kept going. There's a moment in every ultramarathon when the race stops being about running and starts being about eating. Because once you're out there long enough, 12 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, the body is no longer negotiating. It's issuing demands, calories, salt, something the stomach is actually willing to accept. And that last part is the trick. In ultra running, there is a simple rule about nutrition. It only works if you lead it. You can have the most scientifically engineered fueling strategy ever devised, perfect ratios of carbohydrates, electrolytes, amino acids. But if you look at it after 15 hours on the trail and think absolutely not, it's useless. The body needs calories, lots of them, but it also needs food you're willing to swallow when the idea of eating anything feels vaguely offensive. I learned something about that last year during the Thailand 500. At the aid stations, they had these bags of freshly cooked white rice. Nothing fancy, just rice.
Too hot?
They would scoop it into
Is it,
plastic
noodles?
bags. Sometimes you'd eat it right there at the station. Sometimes you'd take it with you for the trail.
Thank you.
And the key detail was this. The rice was moist,
Yes, I am.
not dry, not crunchy, just simple, soft rice. And after hours of running, it was perfect. So over the past couple of weeks, I started experimenting with that idea during my training runs. Before heading out on longer runs, I packed white rice into Ziploc bags and slid them into the back of my running vest. Now, at the start of the run, it's just rice in a bag. But a few hours later, after bouncing around inside the vest while the Arizona sun does its work, something interesting happens. The rice is still good. Actually, it's really good. Soft, easy to eat, easy to swallow, which matters more than you might think when you're deep into a long run. Because when you're tired and dehydrated, the last thing your body wants is dry food. That's one of the realities of races like the Cocodona 250. Hot, dry, dusty. And in those conditions, foods like nuts, crackers, and chips, things that sound perfectly reasonable sitting at the kitchen table, become nearly impossible to eat. Your mouth is too dry. Your throat doesn't cooperate. And suddenly, a handful of almonds feels like you're trying to chew gravel. Moist food works better. Rice works. My crew will know this. During Cocodona, they'll have a portable rice cooker in the crew vehicle, which means somewhere out there between the desert and Flagstaff, there will be fresh rice waiting. That may sound simple, but in an ultramarathon, simple food is often the best food. And sometimes the trail provides something unexpected. A couple of years ago during the Summit 200 in Colorado, I hit a rough patch. Energy was fading. The legs were slowing down. That quiet, creeping feeling that the engine is running out of fuel. Another runner saw what was happening and handed me something called a walking tamale. I'd never heard of it before, but I ate it, and it worked. It had moisture. It had calories. And within a little while, the body remembered how to keep moving again. Sometimes that's all nutrition needs to do, just carry you into the next aid station. There are other options too. On longer races, I'll sometimes carry freeze-dried camping meals. They're light, easy to pack, and when you add water, they turn into a full meal with a serious calorie count. Hot water is ideal, but in the middle of a long segment between aid stations, cold water works too. You stir it up, wait a few minutes, and suddenly you've got a meal in your hands while standing somewhere in the wilderness, which is a strange and wonderful thing. All of this, the rice, the tamales, the freeze-dried meals, is part of the same experiment, training the stomach. Because ultramarathons aren't just a test of legs and lungs. They're a test of what your body will accept when it's been moving for days. And if you find food that works, food you'll actually eat when everything hurts, then you've solved one of the hardest problems in the race, one spoonful of rice at a time. There's a moment leaving the Cocodona Posse Grounds aid station when you look up. You can't help it. The Red Rock Towers are right there. Coffee Pot, Capitol Butte, the whole cathedral of sandstone that makes Sedona the most photographed small city in America. You've just come in from a long segment. You've sat down, maybe eaten something, charged your watch, and now you have to leave all of that. The chairs, the crew, the relative sanity of flat ground, and climb back into those rocks. This year, the segment runs 16.9 miles with 3,580 feet of climbing and 1,628 feet of descent, ending at the Schnebly Hill aid station. What hasn't changed is the Hangover Trail, and the Hangover Trail is why we're here. The route out of Sedona is a navigation puzzle. Out and back on the same trail you just came in on, two-way traffic, runners coming and going, then a left on Highway 89A, a sidewalk stretch, a hard left at the Adobe Jack trailhead. Single track takes you under the highway through a box culvert. You pop out, a private road, Brewer Road, Ranger Road. The underpass, Oak Creek alongside you for a moment, which is beautiful and brief. Then Schnebly Hill Road, and the climb begins. The navigation demands your full attention. This is not a section to sleepwalk. Check your location. The turns come fast, and they don't announce themselves. But then the Huckabee-Schnebly connector, a left onto Huckabee, the Munswagen Trail, and then a hard left, the Hangover Trail. The race describes it as the crown jewel of Sedona single track, and for once, race director hyperbole is actually underselling the thing. The trail snakes through the Painted Dome, Teapot, and merry-go-round spires, formations that look like God himself was experimenting with sculpture and decided to keep all the drafts. The red rock opens up around you. The trail traverses slick rock in places. If you have a fear of heights, this will be clarifying. If you don't, it will still make you stop and stare and forget for a few minutes that you've been running for 100 and some miles. This is the section that will probably make you cry. Those are the race director's words. They are not wrong. The trail eventually releases you back onto Schnebly Hill Road. One more mile of climbing to a water station. Fill everything you're carrying. Then the road tilts. The Verde Valley disappears behind you. and you cross an invisible line. You are now on the Cocodona Plateau, the Mogollon Rim, the land of ponderosa pines. The temperature will drop, the terrain will open, the red rock is gone. Put your headphones in, find your zone. A right turn brings you to the Schnebly Hill aid station, where your crew is waiting, where drop bags are staged. One more thing about this stretch of trail. Sedona has a reputation. The vortexes, the crystals, the UFO sightings. More reported sightings per capita than anywhere else in the country, if you're counting. Most of it you can take or leave. But there's a ghost story worth knowing. Richard Wilson was a hunter and trapper who lived along Oak Creek in the late 1800s. In the summer of 1885, he encountered a grizzly bear in the canyon that now bears his name. He shot it. The bear ran. Wilson chased it. The bear turned around. Wilson did not survive. There are no grizzly bears in Arizona anymore, but there are reported sightings, a figure out on the Wilson mountain trails matching his description, moving through the canyon, keeping watch. I'll be passing through his territory in the dark, most likely, somewhere in the long hours between Sedona and the plateau. The trail is beautiful. The night is quiet. Keep moving. And that's week 8, a week that, if you look only at the statistics, reads like this: 133.5 kilometers of running, 2,311 meters of climbing, hours in the desert, hours in the mountains. But the numbers never quite tell the whole story, because inside those numbers were loose dogs on the Maricopa Trail, a phone that wasn't actually missing, a 90-degree run through the hills of Paloma Park, a windy morning on the Black Canyon Trail, a snake, 2 walking tamales, and a Ziploc bag full of white rice doing quiet but important work. And somewhere inside all of that, the body adapted a little. The legs got a little stronger, the engine got a little deeper, which is the entire point. Because the real destination for all of this is still out there on the calendar. The start line of the Cocodona 250, from the desert near Black Canyon City to the finish in Flagstaff. 250 miles of trail, but races like that are not built on race day. They're built here, 1 week at a time. This was week 8, and next week, the work continues.